Well, hello there and welcome to Travels with Geordie. If this is your first visit, my name is Peter Knowles and I live on this classic wooden motor cruiser here in Victoria, British Columbia, along with the loving memory of my pup Geordie, all the while fixing it up for some pretty ambitious cruising someday. If that's the sort of thing you might find interesting, please consider sticking around and subscribing. I'd love to have you. Well, yes, finally got the fuel system working. Lots of false starts and lots of frustrations, but it's up and running and I'm so happy with it. Let's, as usual, jump back in time and see how we got here. All right then, so let's get to putting the fuel system back together for the final time. Okay, starting with the filters. Now the filters already have their fittings taped and tightened, so that's ready to go. These screws are temporary until I can get the proper bolts. Have to be very careful. Some places seem to be putting the prices rolled up inside the fittings. You'd hate to miss that. Just a little note about extruded fittings like this. This is basically a street elbow, right? Well, this is also a street elbow. They're both ½ inch, but you'll notice that extruded ones are much tighter than forged, cast, or however this is produced ones. So when you're in a tight situation, ask for an extruded elbow. Woohoo, a little sunshine. Okay, time to start making up these lines. And I'm gonna say about there. Now I'll just make, that'll go on there, and I'll make another one the same size. Let me just see if it's also just suitable for these. I think actually the same size hose could do all of these. Yes indeed, 4 like this. And we're off. Now, again, using quality hose clamps for this, and for fuel systems, every connection has to have 2. I may run out for the other stuff, but I'll have a rough idea of how many I'm going to need to get from the chandlery. So let's put 4 on this first hose, and I'll alternate them. 1 left, 1 right, just checking that that makes sense with what I'm able to do here. I'll be able to fit, and up here I'll definitely be able to fit. 1 left, 1 right. Now, to ease assembly, just a little bit of fluid film. Okay, that goes on nice and easy, and up to there. Nice and easy. Okay. All right, this is going great. 4 more clamps. Another hose. Okay, for the fuel pumps, 4 more clamps. 1 left, 1 right. I love it. I love it. And yes, you know, I love it. Okay, wait, there's no way we're getting this thing installed just yet. There's quite a bit to do. I have to replace these screws. I have to replace the screws that I'm holding the filters on with actual bolts, and I've been to the hardware store and got all that. Also, I needed some switches. Now, this is a little bit embarrassing. The best I could really do was create these two little switch blocks that will come up here and sit right about there to operate the two electric pumps. Not elegant at all, but I just didn't have the resources to do much better than that in a hurry, and I wanted to make sure that they were relatively secure. So they'll go on, and pretty soon we can get this thing actually installed. Anyway, so let's start changing screws anyway. Off with the cheap, mild steel screws and in with the stainless. There we go. And now the filter bolts. Alright, well, I'm really not very happy with these or proud of them, but tidied up with a little bit of split loom and they'll certainly do the trick. Okay, that'll have to do. Alright then, at long last, it's time to get this thing installed, and there's more to that than meets the eye. Thing is creating a route through all this wood to where the fuel is needed, and that's not particularly sophisticated, but it'd be nice to do it really neatly. So I've removed these two screws. I can slide this one out with its channel on it, and I think what I'm going to do is just remove the top of it corresponding to this beam, and then I'll be able to drill through here and have clear access through there. Yeah, I think that's fine. All right, so a larger hole for the vent line, and that has to be an inch forward from here so that I can pass in front of the insulation that's going to be on here. Excellent. Offset from that to retain some strength in this structure, although it's not that important because of all this, for the fuel feed and the fuel return. Before I replace this panel, I'm going to put a splice piece in here so that it becomes integral with the main panel. So that's pretty straightforward. A couple of counterbores. And we can slide. Excellent. You know, it's not elegant, but I'm perfectly happy with it. That's just fine. Let's do the same on the other side. All right. Okay, now speaking of this panel, I have splurged and bought one sheet of sound insulation because I want to get it on this panel before I mount the fuel system here so I don't have to remove it or try and fuss around underneath it. So let's get that on. Alright, so the sound absorbing panels come in 32 by 54 inches by an inch thick, and these are quite nice. These are foil, then foam, then a heavy layer of vinyl, then foam, pretty much standard sound absorbing pads. And the problem for me is that they're 32 inches wide and I need 35 inches to get across here, so I didn't get a really efficient cut, so I'll have to cut that out the other way, and I'm going to make it the full size of this panel. Now obviously the easiest way to do that really is to just take this back out again and use this as a template to cut it out. So now many of the sections of these cutouts This is the drive shaft. This is the exhaust. Can be tighter than they are here for this sound insulation rather than wood, because, for instance, if the drive shaft having to bump the sound insulation, it's not going to cause nearly so significant a distress. Likewise with the exhaust, I can be a little tighter, and below that I'll just put a slit to be able to get the insulation over the exhaust pipe, and again around this little section of the shifter linkage. There we go, that's that. Don't know why I bothered with that. Okay, I'll put this back in. I don't really have the right shears for this, but this will have to do. I'm sure there's professional sound insulation cutters out there wincing at this, but this will work. Oh yeah, absolutely lovely. Like a puzzle. Absolutely brilliant. Okay, excellent. Now just to fix it. And to attach it, I have a schwack of nice big fender washers and some long stainless steel screws. So it's tempting, of course, to use a little spray adhesive on here because, of course, that would make it bond quite well. But that just has a one-way trip element to me that I just don't like. So I'm going to persevere with just screws. I think I'll hold off at 4 for now until I've installed the fuel system panel, and then I can fill in around that. Okay, whoa, does that mean we're there? Does that mean we're at that magic moment? In retrospect, this is probably in the wrong place. All right. This is pretty exciting. Holy moly. Okay, now it has to go low enough that the vent hose, the crossover vent hose, can come across the top of this. Okay, nothing now but the thousands of hose clamps. Let's start with the return from the engine. Oh, this is good fun. On the side of the engine bed. Very nice. Want to leave some room for some P-clips that are going to have to go on there. It should be noted that any P-clips on a fuel line in the engine bay must be metal ones, so they're the metal ones with the rubber coating on them, because they have to withstand a brief period of fire. 2 hose clamps, one left, one right, a little shot of fluid film, and that's on. Okay. Beauty. All right, then next the supply. And on, easy peasy. Okay, and fish through here. Here comes the return for the port tank, which is going to go down around the bottom of everything. It's going to require some P-clips, obviously, to do this, and come up through and on to here. Okay. All right, so I'm here at the tank, like that. And then this is going to come around like that. While we're here, let's set up this vent. And the port side supply. And on. Oh, it's going so nicely. And because I'm going to have to be able to close this side up to be able to work on the other side, I have to put the vent on here as well. Okay. Very nice. Okay, well, other than wiring up the fuel gauge, This side is done. I'm not going to worry about the fuel gauge just now. Well, I would have to say that that went really well. I love it. I love it. Okay, I can close this side up. There we go. Okay, we're all plumbed. Electrical. Okay, we're moving along. Wired up the pumps. That one works. This one works. It's time to see if we can actually get this to prime. Okay, I don't know if I showed you last time, but this little valve here is the bleed bypass, and it's basically just a double seating needle valve. Well, I assume it's a needle valve. In other words, it closes if you wind it in, but it can also be run. The engine can actually be run with it wound all the way out because it seals again. And what happens then is that the fuel system just ends up sort of like an injection loop. In other words, fuel from the tanks through the filters, through the secondary filter, through the lift pump, comes to the injection pump and just continues back in the return. But because there's a restriction on the way back, there's always enough pressure here that the injection pump gets all the fuel it needs. Now, in a perfect world, you'd close this again and the injection pump would be getting full pressure, but apparently, from what I understand, it makes no difference. It can be run open or closed. So I'm leaving it open for now for the bleeding process. Okay, so fuel is now pumping through the starboard raycore and through the return, the bypass on the engine, and back returning to the starboard tank. And if I turn the pump off, I can just barely hear it trickling down into the tank. So I've purged the starboard side. What I haven't done yet is filled the filter. And it's important that the filter is actually filled, because otherwise there's a chance of an air bubble getting into the system and into the engine. And also it means that the filter media is not being used very efficiently, because only if the diesel fuel in here is only a quarter of the way up the filter element, only a quarter of the filter is going to be used. So now I'm going to take the top off this, but I do want to be careful that there's no built up pressure. But as I take this off, I'll be able to tell if there's any pressure built up. If it hisses, no, everything's fine. And no leaking, which makes me happy. It was important that when I installed these filters, that the top of the filter housing wasn't below the potential level in the fuel tank. Otherwise, fuel would just siphon through into the filters. Okay, if you can see, the filter is dry in the top here. So I'm just going to fill it up. There it's coming up, up. And it's right to the top. You can just see the oil on top. All right, that is an incredibly convenient way to prime and bleed raycore filters. Holy mackerel, I love it. Okay, so the starboard system is now completely bled and the filter is filled. Now I'd like to do the same for the port side. The only problem is the port tank is empty. So the first thing I need to do is put some fuel in the port tank, and that's very, very simple. I set the supply side to the starboard tank and the return side to the port tank and run the starboard pump. What that's doing now is sucking out of the starboard tank through the starboard pump, through the starboard filter, through the three-way valve to the engine, through the bypass, back to the return, through the return selector valve, back to the port tank. And you can't hear it, probably, but if I turn the pump off, I can hear it trickling down into the port tank on the other side. I love it, I love it, I love it. Okay, go, 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 go. It's a good opportunity to put things back together while that's transferring. Very nice, very nice. And I have full access to both filters through just the hatch open. Let that pump for a bit while I put a few more things away. Okay then, so that's been transferring fuel over to the port tank for about 15 minutes now. There should be plenty in the bottom of the tank, especially because it comes to a relatively small, narrow area at the bottom, that I can now prime the port tank and the port filter system.
So that should be pretty straightforward. Let's switch the valves over. Now we're going to be still returning to the port tank, but drawing from the port tank as well and using the port pump. I'm going to take you off the stand here, and so you can watch the bowl as it fills. There we go. The pump is primed, and here comes the fuel. Fantastic. Okay then, with the port side system bled and the racor filled, it's time, well, not filled, the bowl is filled, but now we have to fill the top section where the actual filter element is, to make sure that the filter element is working to its maximum ability. Okay, excellent. So now you can see that the filter is dry. Here it comes. Oh, I love it. Hope you can see that that filter is now completely full, which means that the element itself is completely submerged, so it is being fully utilized. Holy mackerel, I'm loving, loving, loving this. I'd have to say that this is a complete success. Very, very happy with the way it went. Now all I have to do is start the engine. So we'll switch back over to the starboard tank because it has much more fuel in it. And I'm going to reprime just a little bit, just in case various switching back and forth got some bubbles. And let that run for just a minute or two. And then we'll start it up. Now, to be fair, it would have started with the old fuel that was in the injection pump. It's how long it runs that really is a true guide, but I'm actually very confident that it's just going to be fine. Well, I gotta say, I am absolutely thrilled with the way this project worked out. I find it neat, tidy, serviceable, functional, and as simple as possible considering what I wanted it to do. There's a little bit yet to do, tidy up the wiring, put some more P-clips on the hoses, etc., etc. But generally, it's functional and off to the races. Okay, we can call that one done. Well, hello there and welcome to the Travels with Geordie Beer of the Week. I'm so happy to be back up on the bridge deck because it's a gorgeous, gorgeous late November day. All right, the beer this week. Yes, it's an espresso stout, but it's a shaft from a well-known local brewery, Moon Underwater. The shaft is kind of a Victoria phenomenon. Coffee, espresso, and stout. You know what I think of flavored stouts, but I just wanted to give it a try because I never have. So let's see how this goes. This way I can finally say to all my friends, yes, I've finally had a shaft in Victoria. Okie dokie. Well, this weather is just a treat. We've had an endless run of wet weather. And if you've been hearing any Canadian news, we had an unbelievable rainstorm here recently, followed by a rather severe windstorm. Currently, the lower mainland, Vancouver, etc., and Vancouver Island are cut off from the rest of the country with major road closures, and in fact there are still people stuck in their cars between two landslides on the Trans-Canada Highway. Cheers to you. Anyway, let's see what we think of a shaft. I can drink that. It's not like your average coffee or chocolate portery stouty thing. It's actually really good espresso flavor in a dark beer. Honestly, I did not think I was going to like that. Wow, awesome. Okay, well, very good. Let's get on with the business at hand. Last week's winner of a Travels with Geordie t-shirt is an individual called Retired Soon. I was going to say gentleman, but I don't know if that's the case. So, Retired Soon, get a hold of me. We'll make sure you get your Travels with Geordie t-shirt. Absolutely just fine. Okay, and this is funny. On the Amazon wish list, yet another Holly fuel pump, which is great because I had put 2 on my list. I now have 2 for the fuel system on the boat, but it's such a nice little pump that I got one, or asked for one, and was just gifted by the pump provider, thank you very much, for my Land Rover, because the electric pump in my Land Rover is a bit sketchy and doesn't self-prime. So I'm super excited about this. So thank you to the pump provider for yet another Holly electric fuel pump. Cheers. Man, what a day. The rest of this afternoon is just going to be so glorious. Okay, all you need now is a word. If you'd like to win a Travels with Geordie t-shirt, simply use the word bliss, because this is so blissful, in a comment down below, and I pick at random over the next week or so worth of comments, and if I pick you, I'll send you off a Travels with Geordie t-shirt. Cheers, see you next week. Bliss, absolute bliss.